Escaping Denver, Batch 4, The Lost Noah Tapes. Same boat ride as last episode, so don't go reading into anything. Now, I know I left off pretty riled up about how the government, or at least governing body, treats these incidents. If something is seen by dozens of people who have no relation to one another or reason to lie in unison, I find it hard to discredit them, although history has taught us that they'll try anyways. Where it gets tough is when it's only one witness. Just one person seeing and experiencing something that, whether they know it or not at the time, is profound. Sometimes it's their inability to put their experiences into words or inability to corroborate their story that makes them so easy to dismiss. The safer, more logical story makes it easier to sleep at night. I said it last episode and I'll say it again: when we operate from fear, we'll always be willing to accept the answer that makes that fear go away. And I get it. I do it too. I was abducted by aliens? Sure you were, buddy. An alien replaced my husband? Oh, I bet. Of all the people in the world, they chose your husband in the middle of doesn't matter Iowa. But this whole experience has taught me to stop and listen. Listen to the ludicrous and enlightening alike and choose for myself what's true. So often these stories get away from themselves and evolve into these new beasts that barely resemble what they started as. It's our job as the curious not to just dismiss something because of how the story evolved, but instead dig deep for the grain of truth where the story started. Let's dive into another episode of Noah's internet radio show, The Ark.
We are back for another episode. You know the drill now. No, I cannot tell you my name, but you know me. I'm the guy trying to solve the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. The guy who isn't afraid to dive headfirst into the weird and unusual, where myth meets lore meets conspiracies. On today's episode, we're going all the way back to the granddaddy of conspiracy theories, the seed from which a nation's skepticism was born. That's right. We're talking the famous Roswell incident from 1947. Easily the most well-known apparent UFO crash in history. Everyone and their grandmother knows about it. You couldn't and can't avoid hearing about it. Even those actively trying to ignore Roswell still heard of Roswell. You ask any adult in America to draw an alien, most of them are the big-eyed guys that later became associated with Roswell. It's ingrained in both pop culture and lore. Slow down, Noah. It took place in Roswell, New Mexico in June 1947. On June 4th, the U.S. Air Force launches this top-secret balloon under a program called Project Mogul, which was aimed at testing a listening device to use for Soviet atomic tests. Researchers lost contact and the balloon crashed on the land of a man named Mac Brazel. In later June, Brazel discovered all this debris scattered around his land, including tinfoil, wooden beams, rubber, and tape. So, on July 5th, Brazel visited his uncle in Corona, New Mexico, and told him about what he found. Now, Brazel lived on his ranch and wasn't one to have his finger on the pulse pop culture-wise. He didn't read sci-fi or frequent the cinema as far as I can tell, so he had no idea that there had been hundreds of sightings of these flying discs that could outmaneuver even the best jets. That is, until his uncle suggested that this debris could be from one of these flying discs. On July 6th, he reported the debris to Sheriff George Wilcox. Wilcox then throws it up the ladder and reports the debris to the Roswell Army Airfield, which housed the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force. Fun aside, at the time, this was the only unit with the ability to transport nuclear weapons. From there, things continue with protocol, and a group of officers were assigned to collect the materials and return them to the base. And on July 8th, seemingly out of the blue, the base issues this press release announcing that the military had recovered a flying saucer. Media from all over the world began calling and hounding them for answers. Was this really the first proof of the discs? Here's the exact press release from the Associated Press on July 8, 1947. The The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chaves County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Mic drop. Did a government entity really just show their cards to the nation? Put it all on Front Street that we have one of these fancy new flying discs. Not confirming aliens, mind you. Took that leap as a nation, but at least confirming UFOs and validating the witnesses. This would have been a historic date penciled into everyone's calendars, celebrated by scientists and philosophers alike. But of course, shortly after, they attempted to squash the story by announcing it was actually a weather balloon that caused the debris. Just like that. A giant whoopsie and let's move on, and that's just not fair. I'm looking at this with an almost 60-year gap, and I'm still feeling disillusioned. It's like telling me you have proof that Santa is real and then saying, our bad, it was just a man in a hat. Not cool. Oh, and for our younger audience, that was a bad example, and yes, Santa is real. But that was it. For many, many years, that was the end of the story, and it wasn't discussed much further. Relegated to the fringes of both science and belief.
And there it is. Our grain of truth. Yes, a rancher found debris on his land, but was it a flying disc from space? Doubtful. He found wood amongst the debris, and that doesn't exactly scream spaceship. Plus, it wasn't until his uncle told him about the discs that they even entered his mind. What's key here is that despite my not believing it was a flying disc, the government did. They didn't immediately dismiss it as hokum because in their minds, the discs already exist. No matter how the story evolves from here, it's that moment where we got a glimpse of what cards the government was holding.
But that was it. For many, many years, that was the end of the story, and it wasn't discussed much further. Relegated to the fringes of both science and belief. At least until 1978, when a ufologist named Stanton Friedman interviewed Jesse Marcel, who stated that the explanations of a weather balloon were simply a cover-up by the government. Since Jesse was the one who had accompanied the debris, he had time with it and believed it was extraterrestrial in nature. Was this the whistleblower we needed, or just someone looking for fame? Doesn't matter, as the National Enquirer tabloid picked up the story and it became big news again. It didn't matter that it was later discovered that Marcel had made false claims about both his time in the military and his education. Not exactly a trusted or reliable witness. Though Marcel himself had never mentioned alien bodies, the Aztec crash saucer hoax in '48 eventually got folded into the lore of Roswell. The hoax was that a second crash occurred, and this time had the body of the small gray aliens we've come to accept as the generic alien. Again, this was debunked, but many believe there were grains of truth buried within it. Roswell and aliens became officially connected with the release of the book, The Roswell Incident, in 1980. The book states that a UFO was flying overhead to observe nuclear weapon activity when it was hit by a lightning bolt and crash landed. To prevent widespread public panic, the government covered up the crash and alien life forms, merging a few different stories into a singular narrative that tries to explain it all. It's too convenient. You don't have to believe it's all connected in order to simply believe it happened. I believe in the crash, I just don't believe in the runaway story it's become. Prominent researchers agree with me and believe that there were no bodies at the site, but the theories persist. It's a juicier story if there's more tangible evidence of aliens, completely ignoring how finding an alien craft in of itself proves there are aliens. It's like, pause and realize what you already have before cranking things up to a level that, and pun intended, to a level that alienates people. There's a life lesson buried in there somewhere. The story continued to evolve, as these things do, and the narrative began to get muddied with all the charlatans and misunderstood alike. The 1991 book UFO Crash at Roswell discusses a possible alien autopsy taking place with the recovered bodies. And that book would later become the inspiration for the 1994 made-for-TV movie Roswell, starring Kyle MacLachlan. There it is, a new generation only hearing this version of the story. and all the other versions of the story are essentially repeats of each other. The TV shows, movies, books, comic books, all of them tie alien bodies to the crash at Roswell, which is a bummer because the story was cool enough without all the noise. Silver lining to all of this, the town of Roswell has actually embraced the whole thing, turning it into a tourist hotbed for UFO fans. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but if you wander around town long enough, you'll get to talk to someone who has had an encounter themselves. So what do you think? Alien encounter? Secret military technology? Truly a crashed weather balloon? Why's it always weather balloons? My 2 cents, a crash occurred and what landed was unknown to all parties who found it. The optimist in me leaps to alien, while the realist in me acknowledges that it's likely enemy tech. Let me know what you think. Thanks for joining me again this week on The Ark. As always, keep both your mind and eyes open. Good night.
I'm with Noah. Roswell pisses me off a bit. It was this incredibly cool incident that was too outlandish for the average American to trust and simultaneously too boring for the sci-fi community to be satiated by. They just had to add alien autopsies and terrible grainy footage and photographs. They'd turned it into something with the credibility of a traveling freak show, so much so that I began to question if it was intentional. Yet another layer to this constant puppeteering of our governing bodies. I, for one, am going to try to remember that grain of truth and try to build my beliefs from there, whatever those beliefs become. And I will be back with another batch of messages, and together, we're going to get some answers.